And welcome back to NFG Podcast with Jay the Usual. This is Jay the Usual with NFG Podcast here live with the SuperBowl-Week UFO event update. So over the past week, we've been seeing quite a few objects that I haven't personally, because I haven't been able to get out like I normally would. We actually record UFO and UAP pretty regularly and quite often. And occasionally you might hear Worcester eating and rustling back there. He's our little... He's our little mascot. He's our little UFO mascot over there. Anyway, so it looks like we may have an idea of what the first two UFOs that were shot down after the Chinese spy balloon were possibly spy balloons as well, but of a smaller size or carrying a smaller payload. Now, none of this stuff can be verified because the actual literal up to the minute information is classified information due to national security reasons, and I have no connections to any of this stuff personally, but following the UAP phenomena for quite some time, ever since I started seeing quite a few of them around 2019 and filming them regularly, which is not something I planned to do or even tried to do, it just happened. Now it seems the drone pilot in me, which I am actually a licensed drone pilot, made it so that way I understand why certain bits of information that we're getting about this are important, and why some of it is intentional misinformation, and a lot of this is actually somewhat dangerous and a little frightening. But I figure if we can stay ahead of the information, we can be aware, you stay aware and prepared, and know what the hell's going on. Maybe if you end up seeing one of these things, you'll know how to, deal with it, or if maybe somebody will get an idea of how to track these things better. Who knows? Because they are getting far too close to several different regions, not just in the United States, and it's troublesome. We're not just talking Canada either. There have been spy balloons, specifically spy balloons, spotted in 40 different countries over the past 3 to 6 months, and as of recently, so within the past week, there have at least been 10 spotted in the continental Americas, and that would include South America. I haven't done too much tracking on that one specifically, but I have also heard that there have been more than usual. We've already been seeing them in Ukraine, apparently, in higher altitudes, and there's a specific type of UFO, UAP type thing that is being seen out there and studied specifically by the leading scientists in these fields. And specifically, these would be fields that have to do with intrinsic studies on tracking objects in higher altitudes, which they can range, but they're normally vehicles, obviously earthly, I would hope. You never... at this point, you can't really tell, honestly, the difference between a movie and reality at this point. It's getting a little muddied. Since we're having a bit of an issue with posting certain footage on Facebook and whatnot, I'm going to have to record this in maybe several pieces and drop this over several iterations, and I know we're going to have to update this continuously anyway, so expect more podcasts about this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do them daily, but I'll try if I can, and if I can't, I'll definitely try to make it a regular thing that people can follow, because this definitely is important. I don't know to what level, how serious this is per se. I'm sure there are other people that know more than I do. But from what I do know, this is incredibly serious. You're talking about more incursions than, the only thing comparable in recent history that I've heard that somebody mentioned in a podcast, I believe it was Thomas Fessler's podcast, which you can, any podcast and any sources that I mentioned, you feel free to check out. And in fact, I urge you to see the information that I mentioned in this podcast or any others. Cross-verify that with something that is an opposing source, so that way we can get the true story. That's what's most important here, because I mean, we're talking about a possible World War III. We're talking about possible alien incursion. We're talking about possible AI weird shit, rainbow unicorns riding around, flying around in with bifocals on and floating clouds. I have no idea. I have no idea what the hell this stuff is, because like I said, I have no connection with any of this stuff besides being able to film them. I've mentioned these things before, but I'll mention them quickly again, and we'll talk about them in another podcast coming up. But the things that we filmed, I have shown only a few of the videos. A few of them were too disturbing, and I didn't want to get bothered. Let's leave it at that. And the other ones that I have posted were ones that were usually live. So you'd have to go back into our older recordings on Facebook. They all still exist, unless some weird shit is going on, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen anything like that. We have been able to go all the way back to like 2, 3, 4 years ago, whenever we started really posting regularly about this. But we've been seeing them for roughly 5 years, and it's getting pretty strange out there. When you film them regularly, that's when it gets a little creepy. But something that looked like the moon, a full moon, but 10 times bigger than the biggest you've ever seen the moon. So like, even when it's on the horizon, it looks like super, super big, and it's like, what the hell is this? Is that Jupiter? What is this? Imagine 10 of those, right? And the craters weren't craters. It was like swirling. It almost looked like Van Gogh's painting, which is really creepy, because there was another person that mentioned seeing something like that in another show on, I believe, on like History Channel or something. But I saw this thing with my eyes, and it only lasted a few seconds. I was completely sober. I don't hallucinate or anything like that, and it was a sight to see. Now, I had a camera on, and one of the worst decisions I've ever made in my life was deleting that video, because when I looked on the video, I couldn't see anything. And it wasn't just like on the camera that I uploaded the video onto a larger screen. I looked at it over and over again. I couldn't see anything. I tried to use editing equipment, nothing. And I deleted it, and I shouldn't have, because I didn't realize that sometimes these things can only be seen in infrared or other types of filtration. So I may have had I could have had one of the most incredible things anybody's ever seen. I thought that within a few seconds there was for some reason a moon that was going to crash into our planet, and it was already that close. It was going to be a few seconds that we had to live. That was it. It was bright. It was bluish green. Saw that. Maybe filmed it. Then accidentally deleted the video. That one really hurts me to this day. Before that, the reason we were even looking around there and filming around that area was because literally just at home, at a place that I was living at the time 2 years ago within Massachusetts, it was one of the clearest nights during 2020 when the sky was at its clearest, and they were saying that it was because all the corporations had closed down and people were in lockdown. And I was sitting outside by myself at a fire, and I was doing a slight bit of recording earlier on, but I had tired myself out, so that night I was kind of just sitting there and burning up a bunch of wood that we needed to get rid of for the yard, because we had a lot of trees and stuff. So as I'm looking up, and this is another night, it was strange. It seems like every single time, right? I mean, I'll admit openly and plainly, I use cannabis regularly for ulcerative colitis and arthritis and all this stuff, that I have arthritis and whatnot. And I used to drink pretty regularly, like beers, not every night, but like it would be a pretty regular thing a couple times a week for somebody to bring over some beers, or I'll go out for beers and people would be having a blast and doing whatever the fuck, fishing and camping and going out to different cities and having different experiences, or staying home and just like having people over doing podcasts. You'll tend to see it when you watch the shows, but for some reason, when the UFOs were around, or UAP or whatever, I wasn't using anything at all. So to see stuff during those particular times, I was never like an alcoholic, never like, using crazy edibles where you would be hallucinating or anything like that. I only smoke, really. I used some edibles, but not like that. And not at the time specifically either. It was just really odd to be that sober and see these things. But this time I had seen, I believe it was in June or July, the entire sky from one point, a bunch of dots. It was like a star. It was a star. It looked like it, and then all of a sudden, a light that looked like another star would come off of it, and then another, and then another, and then it became hundreds, and then it became thousands, and they went across the entire sky in all different directions, and some of them were fucking changing direction. And I'm not talking about like a curve. I'm talking like they would stop, go this way, stop, go that way. It looked like looking at a petri dish of like living shit that you see like from a pond or something. Like I can't even to this day like. So I went and looked up like what it could be, because I thought like, why would satellites can't do that? I don't think. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So it was really bothering me and scaring me. Supposedly the Congress had a drone fleet that had been hacked, and a third of them they didn't know where they were. So I don't know if like some weird rogue AI had them flying around in the air. I don't know if that's what that was at all. Maybe it was some type of birds that I've never heard of. I don't know. I'll tell you this. They all looked like little stars, and then as they were moving, they started looking like different shapes. They started looking like jet shapes and like the Tic Tac type. And they were all the same size roughly, and all the same color, glowing white. Just odd. Right over the city. Perfectly visible with just eyes. I wasn't looking with binoculars, telescopes, I used cameras. I used all these different things. And I filmed the stuff and shared it, and this was not that. So, yeah. I also saw, allegedly, I can't verify it because I didn't record it, the Chinese, the glide vehicle that went around the world in an hour that they used, and then everybody found out later. Because what it looked like when I saw it, this particular object was later on, I believe, it was literally around the same day or time as that particular test. When we found out later on, it looked like a tube of light, and it literally went like this across the sky this fast. So imagine if you're looking with your eyes, and it was between two houses. So like, let's say the space was like this, and it moved like this. That's how so like, all right, let's say my nail, right, is the object, and this is the space in between. It went like this. That's how fast it moved across the entire sky. Now let me tell you something. Only from what I've seen, shooting stars and NASA rockets can move like that. But that was the only thing that I could track that day. But there were a lot of SpaceX things going up back and forth at that time. And it was facing the same direction as that Fire Moon thing, so I do wonder if a lot of that stuff is related to SpaceX, because a lot of the things that they shoot off react with the ionosphere and make a lot of different colors in the sky and strange things. In fact, the other day people thought they were seeing that spiral, but they thought it was a SpaceX thing, but that has nothing to do with anything that's going on right now. There's a bunch of different other objects that I'll talk about in other podcasts, but those will be reference point going forward, because I haven't done anything focused on this stuff yet. So now that everybody's aware of this stuff, let's talk about the first object that was shot down with an actual missile over North Carolina just a week ago. Now, just those words are mind-blowing, but let's go over this. So it was a Chinese balloon. They said the Chinese authorities said that it was a weather research balloon. Now this balloon, and it wasn't, the details weren't released until after, or at least soon up to before it was shot down, like right before it was shot down. It was put out that the balloon itself was 200 feet tall, and I don't know, we didn't get a width, but the payload was 3 bus lengths, okay, and the weight was somewhere between 5 and 8 tons. Now, let me tell you something. I know a little bit about air stuff. Have to, because I'm a literal drone pilot. Was not aware that there was a 200-foot balloon that you can make that could carry 8 tons. Okay? And when I heard that shit, I was like, that's pretty amazing. Okay? That's some amazing science right there. But there was some other shit attached to this stuff that it's like, well, 5 to 8 tons, like what is, what's it made out of? What the hell is this stuff? We're talking solar panels. we're talking antenna, and we're talking the type of antenna that can be used to research military facilities specifically. Now, this is what was said in the reports, and some of these reports, or at least some of the parts of the information of these reports that I'm going to give you are going to be from sources that this information may not be accurate. It could be misinformation. What we're trying to do is get to the bottom of the information that's actually real, and the only way to do it is to have this conversation, which is why free speech is important. So, if we can find out which parts of these bits of information are actually true or verifiable or continuously repeat and aren't discountable, then we can kind of get a better picture of what's going on and if we're actually safe or not, because nobody seems to think it's important to tell us that. So, that's what I'm here for. So, here we go. The Chinese spy balloon was shot down over South Carolina, 200-foot tall balloon with cargo of 5 to 8 tons, solar panels, concerns about chemical warfare. Now, this was a rumor that it's not as if somebody thinks that actually happened. But what people were questioning was, is it possible that these balloons could be carrying something nefarious? Because if we're just shooting them down, we don't know what's inside them. What's actually, what is that air comprised of? And if we're not being told all about all the details of the machinery, can we at least know, are we safe from the contents within it that's being shot into our air supply? Because regardless of whether or not these physical objects are landing on people's heads, it doesn't really matter, because if there's something bad inside of the balloon itself that gets into our air or water supply, we may already be fucked. I can't put it any other way than that. And, you're going to have to excuse some of the language that I'm going to use here, because I'm going to have to speak freely in order to get this information out as eloquently as possible, because this is all going to be, it's all going to be questioned. I'm going to have to live stream as much of it as possible, which is not going to be easy. They have a lot of different stipulations that block this stuff now. And I've literally had entire businesses and seen entire businesses destroyed, and maybe even people killed over, things that are being mentioned over the past couple of years. So, this isn't like it's like classified stuff either. So I don't know why. I think people just freak out, they get upset, and then they start doing things that they don't mean to do. People go fucking literally crazy, like that guy that shot his kids with a harpoon over something that he thought was going on and then couldn't verify later, and it was fucked up. I don't even know the details of a lot of the shit, and some of it I don't want to know anymore because it's a bit much. But like I said, that's why we go through these things, so that we don't have to repeat over and over again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to create another video that you're going to be able to watch right away. I'm going to post these all tonight, and it should be about an hour, hour and a half altogether, because there's a lot of information here. And all of this information, like I said, I cross-verified several times. I can't guarantee that any of it's real because of how serious the situation is. This is incredibly serious. But I'm just letting you know what everybody else should know in public, but is sometimes tough to know if you don't have the time, because this is coming from multiple sources. There's a lot of sources here. I'm talking probably 50 plus sources that I could name if I had to write them all down. Any major news source, like I said, is carrying the story as well, and you can cross-verify this with anybody that's speaking from an opposite platform or saying this is all bullshit. We want that information that is useful to the opposing idea that maybe this isn't, either this is real or it isn't real. We want information from both sides because we want to know what's true and we want to know how safe we are. We don't give it. If this is an alien, I don't give a shit. If this is China, I don't give a shit. I want to know, are we safe? Because if they're not going to tell us the stuff that would tell us, is it China? Is it something crazy like new shit? They're not going to tell you that. But they damn sure are paid taxes to fucking tell you whether or not you're safe, and whether or not your kids are safe, and whether or not your family and your friends are safe, and whether or not you're going to get hit by a car tomorrow because you're warning people about it. So, Jay the Usual is here to do his part. And that's all I can do because you're not really allowed to do much of anything else anymore. So, there you go. Alright, so we'll be back. Make sure to share, like, comment. The more we grow, the more we show, the more you view, the more we do. NFG Podcast with Jay the Usual is the title we're going to be putting this under. It's going to make it like a subsidiary to Jay the Usual Multimedia, because that's my pilot and business stuff. Make sure to, if you're interested in drone stuff, if you're interested in any comedy stuff, which is what we normally do, then you can check that out as well. It's on our page. But this is going to be a separate show, separate episode, episodic sort of thing until this event is over. Hopefully it does end with nothing terrible happening. And hopefully I'm wrong about, the worst parts of this. I'll talk the rest of the details about the spy balloon right now, and once we're done with that, we'll mention the detail. We'll talk about the other 3 objects in the next 2 videos. I will split this up into 3 parts. The more I go through this, the more I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm not going to edit a lot of this, so it may be in long form and there may be a slight bit of rambling, but I did write this down to try to minimize that. So bear with me if you can. So this Chinese spy balloon was first spotted off the, and I may be wrong on this particular part because I'm really not sure that I had the right report in mind when I was writing this. Normally I look right at the stuff, but this part I was away from the paper, so I want to be clear on that. The Aleutian Islands, I believe, is where it was first spotted, and if I'm wrong about that, it was definitely up to the northwest Alaskan region, or possibly more northeast of the Alaskan region. But I know it came in from that area, swooped in let's pretend for a minute that you're looking at a map of the United States. Normally I would put up a graphic for this, but since we're live, we're going to do it like this right now. It curved downwards from the Alaskan area, went through the United States past the Montana area where it was possibly recording military outposts and whatnot. Went, I believe, east past the Dakotas and then curved back downwards and still headed east towards the North Carolina, South Carolina area where it was shot down with an A9X Sidewinder shot from an F-22, which was flown out to buzz it, look for pilot, and shoot, which is pretty standard. However, the initial reports stated that the missile wasn't armed, and I don't know if that was just because of the source we were using, or if that was, maybe the case and they just didn't want to tell people that it was armed and they didn't want to scare anybody. I don't know, but that was the initial report that I received, and it became that it was armed, and I checked the cost on that. It's $500,000. So this is a serious missile, heat tracking. I believe it can be changed over to differential tracking, so if the surroundings are hotter than the object, then it'll be able to track that as well. And I believe some of the software is pretty maneuverable as well when it comes to higher tech stuff like that, but I don't really know many details beyond that. The recovery process for this object is not something that a lot of people have been covering, but there was a hovercraft that was located by either a photographer, a reporter, or a civilian, and then given to a reporter of a hovercraft that was on the North Carolina or South Carolina. It was Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach is South Carolina, so it was on the shore of Myrtle Beach, and nobody was entering the ship, so I'm not sure if they just didn't have anybody outside at the time when the photograph was being taken, but they thought that it was abandoned. They thought that it was just run a beach, and well, at least that's how it looked. I believe we may have read either the same report or a report right after that said that it was just run aground. So that could mean that there was people in there and it just, unhooked and then just floated off or some shit, which it happens. I don't know if that can happen with a big floating ship like that needs air to run through it, but, I don't pretend to understand a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing nowadays. But it was a hovercraft. This large hovercraft was used to take this thing back. It's obviously a huge balloon, massive payload. And then they ran up onto Myrtle Beach. I guess they ran out of supplies. What supplies that would be, I don't know. Doesn't make much sense to me. But that was the claim. And then they ended up departing today, I believe. That report might have been from 2 days ago, so the time frame is somewhere in there. Now, I'm going to mention the other 3 objects, and then we're going to talk about the details in the next podcast video, which is going to be up next. So that's not going to be something you're going to have to wait for. It will be right up once we're done recording it. So there's the silver cylinder over Alaska. I might actually be missing an object or two in this. There's literally multiple spy balloons, at least 40, maybe more, probably more. And these all may actually be balloons at the same time, but they are spy balloons. Keep that in mind. These are spy balloons. The Chinese spy balloon had hardware and, I believe, connections to software, but the hardware is for sure, that can be used to monitor military bases. And that is, I believe, and they won't state this, but from what I'm looking at, that's the reason that they didn't shoot it down right away. Now, what's the strategy behind that? Well, if, let's say you find that there's a digital crime taking place, the last thing that you want to do is start taking every USB chip that you see in that house and start snapping them in half. You want to keep everything preserved, look at everything as together as you can, but also want to keep the people that are going to be looking into it safe. So that, to not shoot at something that could be an explosive, it would be a bit foolish. So I commend the pilots for the work that they've done, and there's possibly been some weird shit going on with jamming. I can't verify the story yet, but there are 3 different sources that are mentioning that the most recent object, the 4th object out of all 4 that we're going to talk about, out of the 3 UFOs, the 3rd one would be labeled as an object that in one way or another interfered or caused interference with some sort of radar, or possibly they just misworded it and said that it was they were interfering with civilian flight routes. Which, how you misword that, it doesn't make much sense to me. So I don't think that's the case. I think that there was some sort of interference, but they don't want to say how or what because they're not sure. So we're going to talk about the 2 silver cylinders, one shot over Alaska at the border of Canada, Prudhoe Bay, at Dead Horse. So those are all the names of the towns there, at a height of 40,000 feet. And let's see, that was seen to be traveling at 20 to 40 miles per hour, which seems to be floating with wind speeds, I would think. But 2 silver cylinders, which are said to be spy balloons now by Chuck Schumer, but what the fuck does Chuck Schumer know? I don't know. And the 3rd object, the 4th object, but the 3rd UFO, was over Montana. At first they couldn't find it when they flew, I believe it was an F-16 out. But then it was shot down over Lake Huron, and we're just starting to get details from that now. The story came in about 2 hours ago. Yeah, Worcester, you getting excited about the aliens? There's 3 UFOs? E.T. getting pissed? What's going on? Do you know him? I know him. Was E.T. a him? I don't know. It's kind of weird walking around with no pants. A bunch of kids. Okay. So, the silver cylinder type UFO balloon things were described as similar to each other, but dissimilar from the Chinese spy balloon in that they were very small compared to it, the size of small cars compared to 3 large buses and a 200-foot balloon. So, the Lake Huron object, from what I've heard from initial reports, we've only got a handful so far, say that it is like the cylindrical object, so it is another silver cylinder. And these silver cylinders were said to have no visible means of propulsion. They weren't necessarily maneuvering, per se. They were more just hovering or floating or levitating. Probably balloons. But why they're not telling you that? What are in the balloons? Is it possible there is something in the balloons? Is there eventually going to be a balloon that does have something in it that we don't want to pop? How many balloons are there? Where are they? Should we be aware of them? Or is one going to pop and actually hit people like they were afraid of in the first place? We don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. So we'll be right back with some more details as soon as we get back to this next video. Oh, share, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Definitely appreciate it. And let us know what we don't know.